All right, everyone, welcome back to Get NIST-y, the series that breaks compliance out of the checkbox trap and turns it into a real security advantage. No fluff, no FUD, just practical strategies to make compliance work for your MSP. I'm Jared Kasner, and I'm joined as always by my co-founder of Blacksmith InfoSec and co-host of Get NIST-y, Michael Zabarski.
Hey everyone.
Today we're going to do a special episode in the wake of the Axios hack on March 31st, specifically breaking down what it means to be an MSP when a JavaScript library like this one gets compromised. First, a little bit of background. Axios is a wildly popular JavaScript library to facilitate network requests. With more than 100 million weekly downloads, it is consistently in the top 15 most widely used JavaScript libraries published to NPM. Now, some caveats before we begin. This attack is still fresh and being dissected, so more details will emerge in the coming days and weeks, so I apologize in advance for anything that we don't get quite right about exactly what happened here. But here's what we know so far. The attack appears to have started on March 30th, sometime in the early hours UTC. Yet attackers gained access to a core maintainer's NPM credentials and changed his email to a Proton Mail account that they controlled. They then published a harmless minor version bump, version 1.14.0, ostensibly to confirm their access. Then, at just after midnight UTC, 0021 UTC, they published maintenance version updates, versions 1.14.1 and 0.30.4, which included a malicious hidden dependency called plain crypto.js. This dependency contained a very clever cross-platform remote access Trojan that was hidden in obfuscated base64 encoded text. When it was installed, it ran a post-install script that compromised the host machine and then cleaned up after itself, clearing out evidence of its existence. The compromise involved setting up a beacon that connected to a command and control or C2 server that received remote execution commands, exfiltrating credentials, and other data. By 0320 UTC, less than 3 hours later, the malicious package had been wiped from NPM and its global mirrors. Most of the articles on this attack have focused on what developers can do to prevent this type of attack from compromising their systems, which is certainly very valuable. However, while the software vendors are the ones who are most immediate and direct risk from these types of attacks, their end customers, which includes MSPs, are at indirect risk from these types of attacks as well. So today, we're going to talk about what MSPs and their clients can learn from these supply chain attacks and what you can do to mitigate any impact from them. So, Mike, let me stop with my little preamble here, dissecting what happened, and turn over to you. Like, what advice would you give to an MSP when they call you and say, "What do I need? Like? I saw this Axios hack thing on r/MSP or all over the internet because it kind of broke the world for a little bit." What would you recommend to an MSP or an SMB or somebody who is the consumer of software in the wake of this attack?
Yeah. So there's a couple of pieces. There's some pieces of stuff to do before this attack, stuff like supply chain risk management, making sure your vendors actually have a security program, things like that. Making sure that your controls are in place as far as MDR, monitoring things like Sentinel-1, etc. should have been able to catch this and stop it. Post-attack, again, a combination of validating with your vendors to say, hey, were you affected? I know for us, we got a really nice email from Datadog, for example, saying, hey, we use this library, here's what the affected things were, here's what we've done about it, etc. Ideally, more vendors do that. I don't think enough did. And so reaching out proactively to your vendors, to your account managers, and saying, hey, do you guys use this library? If so, how were you affected? What should we be on the lookout for, etc. The good news about this is it was caught relatively quickly and pulled back relatively quickly for relative terms of relative.
Yeah. I mean, when you're talking about 100 million downloads, that's something like 10,000 downloads per minute.
Yep.
So, yes, it was only live for just shy of 3 hours, but there's a lot of minutes in just shy of 3 hours. So, yeah. So let's dissect the pre-attack and the post-attack separately. So we talked a little bit, or you mentioned supply chain risk management or third-party risk management or vendor risk management. Um, I can just send you my SOC 2 report and call it good, right?
Absolutely perfect.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, no, so definitely get the SOC 2 reports. Actually look at them. Actually read them. It's a good starting place. Because I've seen a lot of people that get their SOC 2 reports from their vendors and say, cool, we got the SOC 2 report, let's file it without ever actually reading it. Make sure that all the systems that you use are actually in scope of the SOC 2 report. We've seen too many times where people will take parts of their organization and scope it into the SOC 2. So make sure the SOC 2 is comprehensive for the whole organization as well as the software that you're using. Make sure it's from a auditing firm that is reputable and that is not just rubber stamping stuff in the wake of all the Delph stuff that you guys have heard going on, I'm sure. And then also make sure that any findings in the SOC 2 were addressed by management, because it's not ideal to have findings, but I'd rather have findings and a acceptable management response to say, hey, here's what we did to fix this, or here's why this finding was there, versus nothing and no management response. And then make
Yeah,
sure.
and so let me touch on a couple of things you said real quickly in there, and then I'll let you continue your thoughts. Sorry, I'm
Yeah.
intentionally interrupting, right? So for those of you who have not seen, there are some allegations that one of the automated, and I say automated very loosely here, automated compliance platforms out there has fabricated results or fabricated SOC 2 reports. Those allegations are still allegations at this point, but there is a whole lot of evidence that seems to suggest that these allegations are very accurate. Um, I actually put this less on the SOC 2 automation platform or the compliance automation platform, although they certainly bear some of the responsibility. But to Mike's point, the auditor in question is certainly um, at a greater fault as far as I'm concerned. And then more importantly, the end clients or the consumers of those reports that are, excuse me, the people who are paying those auditors who are just getting that rubber stamp also bear quite a bit of culpability here. So definitely do your homework on the SOC 2 reports. And I will point out Roddy Bergeron from SureWeb gave a great talk at Write a Boom. And so go out and look for that video. We'll actually try to put the link in the show notes for his talk on how to read a SOC 2 report, because I thought that was a really excellent, like hands-on practical way of getting into a SOC 2 report and what it means, how to read it, how to interpret the information that's in there. Because some of the language is a little bit opaque in some of those reports.
Good.
Sorry, now you may continue.
Yeah. And so on that note, where I was going with this was actually look at the auditor opinion, which can be really one of three things: either an unqualified opinion, and again, this goes back to Jared's language is a little weird. Unqualified means yes, they've passed, and we're not qualifying this passing with any findings. Is just here's our clean opinion. Qualified opinion, so it's hey, they've passed, but there's some findings, some exceptions, etc. Or adverse opinion, which is basically a fail. So check for that, make sure everything's in scope, and then make sure that any findings that there may have been, management has addressed properly. If they don't have a SOC 2 report, or even if they do, and depending on the size of the vendor, etc., you can stipulate some things within the contract language, right? So as you work with a vendor, you can put contract language in place to say, hey, we need you to have A, B, C, D. Depending on the size of the vendor and the size of your organization, they may do that, they may not. I know Jared and I have both been pleasantly surprised of how much a vendor is willing to accept red lines on a standard contract, even for small organizations, assuming that they're same red lines. And do your due diligence, right? If they don't have a SOC 2 report, send them some sort of questionnaire. And again, look at the results, look at what they actually put into the questionnaire. If you're going to send the full SIG, then you're going to should be looking through the full SIG. If you're sending the full SIG light, look through the full SIG light. If you have a
Hey Mike, what's the SIG or the SIG Lite?
Yeah, so they are standardized questions, questionnaires that they have available that you can leverage as a standardized information gathering questionnaire. And I don't remember off the top of my head, so you may need to fact check me, but I think the SIG has something like 800 questions. SIG Lite has around 187, I want to say. I'm actually going to fact check this as we speak.
Yeah, fact check yourself here. But um, while Mike is fact checking himself here, I will just put out a plus one on that. That if you don't have the bandwidth to review the responses, don't bother asking the questions, right? So, which does not mean don't ask any questions, because you absolutely can and should ask questions, but come up with your own questionnaire. Maybe it's only 20 questions, maybe it's 50 questions, maybe it's 187 questions for the SIG-Lite, whatever it is. Make sure you have the bandwidth to review the results and the expertise to be able to like parse the answers that will come back, because I've seen this more and more where the people are getting ChatGPT or Claude or somebody to fill out the questionnaires for them, and so you're getting some very generic responses back as opposed to specific responses back. And so something you want to just be aware of is that, like, make sure that they are real answers that are coming back. Like, actually challenge people. And honestly, you're almost better off just having a live 30-minute conversation to talk through security practices and ask questions live, where they don't have the ability to have ChatGPT generate answers, and you can have much more of a dialogue. If you're set, like, a lot of these questionnaires appear to be yes, no. And so it's, do you have MFA enforced? Well, yes, but for some systems, but not for all systems. Like, there's a lot of nuance and shades of gray in a lot of these things. And so I would strongly encourage you to really, like, dig in on the things that you care about the most, which should include MFA. Anyhow, Mike looks like he's fact checked himself, so I can stop vamping now.
Yeah, I was only a little off. So SIG Lite's around 128 questions currently, and the full SIG is around 1900 questions. Um,
1900.
yes, they've expanded it since
Yeah.
I looked at it last.
Yeah. So I would say definitely don't bother setting the full SIG, although you can draw inspiration from it if you want to. But again, find the questionnaire that works for you. I would strongly encourage you, if the SOC 2 report or ISO report or something answers a question to your satisfaction, just remove it from your questionnaire. Don't bother making them answer the same questions they've already answered, because you already have the answer. There's no point in having them send you a response to something that you already have the answer to anyway. So do yourself and your vendors a favor by making sure you actually understand the questions and the responses, so you can have a meaningful dialogue about it.
Cool.
So,
So I,
all right. So we talked about SOC 2 reports. We talked about questionnaires. What are the things, like, we'll call it left of boom here before the incident? Can somebody think about from a vendor management standpoint?
yep. So uh, know which vendors you have, right? Have a list of vendors. A lot of SMBs, MSPs have no clue who all their vendors are. A lot of times they have duplicative vendors for the same function. So really work internally to figure out, hey, what vendors are we actually using? Because it doesn't help if you don't you don't know who to reach out to if you don't know who your vendors are. One of the first things when you want to secure anything is inventory, right? Know what you have, whether it's people, data, devices, etc. For supply chains, the same thing. Who are your vendors? Have an inventory of vendors somewhere.
Yeah, and this is really also, it's not just your vendors, but your vendors should be. This is one of the, like, really good things about a SOC 2 or an ISO is that report is that they should include subprocessors. So the vendors to your vendors, and being able to inventory those also, and understand, like, if you're dealing with an AI company, which subprocessors are they using? And in this context, a subprocessor is probably one of the frontier labs. So it'll be OpenAI or Anthropic or Perplexity or one of those providers of the AI models. Are they going directly to the source, or are they using, like, Amazon Bedrock or the Microsoft AI Enclave, right? Understand who's accessing your data when you send a request to the AI system, or if you're sending it, if you're doing your books in QuickBooks, do they have subprocessors that are looking at your data, your CRM? All of these different tools have different people that might have levels of access to your data that you're not aware of if you're not paying attention. And so you need to be following not just your vendors, but their vendors also, to the extent that you can.
Yeah, and one of the things that's important is looking at the contract to see if they can change those processors, right? I actually looked at a data processing agreement recently for a friend of mine, and um, it was interesting because the MSA for the organization said that they currently use Anthropic and OpenAI, etc., and they're allowed to add others or switch them at will and notify you after the fact. But then a data processing agreement said, hey, if we bring on a new vendor, you have to approve it in writing before we can actually add them. And so there was, again, conflicts in their own contract language between the two contracts they provided. So look at those just so you know, again, how can this shift over time, right? If they're currently using OpenAI and they bring in another vendor, are they doing their due diligence, making sure that their vendors are actually compliant, etc.? Um, And I think that actually brings up a good piece where most software vendors have a SBOM. Jared, you want to talk a little bit about what an SBOM is?
Yeah. So software bill of materials is not just your direct dependencies, but also your indirect dependencies, right? So when I build a package, when I package software up, there's going to be code that I write. That's first party code. Then there's code that I'm bringing in, the third party code, and then there's fourth and fifth party codes where each of my dependencies is that I'm packaging up in my software will also have the transitive dependencies. And so one of the things that I, as a software developer, can and should be able to do is produce a software bill of materials that shows not just which libraries I'm using, third and fourth party libraries I'm using, but also exactly which versions of those libraries I'm using, so that I know when something happens, I know what my exposure is and whether I am exposed to that, right? And so this is where, in the wake of the Axios incident, for example, I was able to very quickly look at my SBOMs for every release and show, number one, we didn't do any releases during that 3 hour window, so that's great. There wasn't anything that was installed, but I could look at a very detailed and granular level what packages were installed and confirm very quickly that we were not impacted directly by this. And then Mike brought up one of our centralized logging platform. It turns out we weren't actually directly impacted by it, or even indirectly impacted by them, but they had some of their open source libraries that did get impacted, and fortunately, we're not using any of those libraries, right? So there are understanding your entire supply chain and not just your direct, but also your transitive or indirect suppliers is really important. And this is where, again, as you're going through your vendor due diligence, you can even sometimes ask for that SBOM so you know where things are. Now, I will just say that, especially in SaaS, the SBOM is changing fairly frequently because every time they do a release, which you may not even be aware of as they're patching their systems and upgrading things, you may not even be aware when the SBOM changes, but it is a way that you can take a look at stuff. Um, but in the interest of time here, Mike, I think we've focused quite a bit of time on the pre side of things. Let's talk about the post, right? We're now 36 hours post. We're recording this on Wednesday, April 1st. There are no April Fool's jokes in this, so because this will air next week. But we're like less than 48 hours after the Axios compromise. So, like, let's talk about the post compromise for an MSP. What should they be doing? Like, how do they know when they're? How do they even know what their exposure is to an incident like this?
Yeah, so I think it depends on what they're doing, right? If they, because a lot of MSPs are starting to write code, vibe code, etc. So I want to split this up into a MSP that is providing IT services and not doing code development versus an MSP that is. Um, so MSP that is not doing code development is checking with their vendors, making sure that they weren't affected, making sure that again all of their endpoints going back to inventory are protected, whether it's through some sort of MDR that should be able to capture anything. So even if one of your vendors pushed a malicious package down because of this, in this case at least, most MDR solutions should have been able to capture it and stop it. Um, as far as the MSPs that are doing their own development or vibe coding or whatever they happen to be doing these days. Again, it goes back to looking at your packages, making sure that whatever that software bill of materials that the AI has generated, if it has generated one, if it has not, ask it to generate one for you. That way, you know what packages you're coding with. And so, basically, going through that process, um, the fallout from this will be interesting to see what at the end of all the root cause analyses to see what the actual fallout is, um, and how much of it was able to be blocked through EDR, MDR, and how much of it wreaked havoc.
Yep. Yeah, and Mike, you alluded to this in the first part of the call or first part of the recording here, where your better vendors are going to be proactively reaching out to you to say, "Hey, by the way, you were potentially impacted. We were absolutely impacted, but you were not impacted. Whatever." Your less good vendors won't even necessarily know whether they were impacted yet because it's only been 48 hours, and so they may still be assessing the damage. And then there will be some category of vendors that was actively impacted, but is not notifying you, and you will have to reach out to. And so, I would encourage you to be reaching out to your vendors to find out whether they were impacted by this. Um, even if the answer is no, we weren't, just having some reassurance from vendors that, hey, this didn't impact us, can go a long way. Um, because ultimately, like, you, until the world is built on trust, right? If you can't go and ask your vendors, like, and they won't give you a good answer, then that's not a great place to be.
Yeah, and
Um,
I've been there, not with this, but in this past week, we have dealt with that with a vendor where we've gone to ask questions and basically gotten stonewalled with some answers that we did not like, and we're not going to be doing business with said vendor. Make sure that your vendors are good partners to you and can actually be open and upfront about things. One of the other things, Jared, that I wanted to point out is one of the things that things like this try to capture in general, but when malicious packages run, is they're trying to gain more access to your systems. They're trying to look for API keys, database credentials, cloud tokens, all that stuff. So make sure that your stuff is secure, right? Don't store it in a notepad file on SharePoint. Make sure that it's secure in some sort of vault for your all your credentials. Make sure you don't have unlimited lifetime tokens. Make sure that your tokens actually expire and get regenerated to limit risk. So there's other things you can also do to, again, we'll see how the findings of this as this plays out more, what got actually compromised and what didn't, but just general good security practices, right?
yeah, no, I mean, and the breakdown so far from the developer lens is, if your system was compromised, then it was looking for any .env files and taking any of those secrets, looking for other credentials, looking in your home directory for any, and packaging stuff up and sending it back to the command and control server. So, um, if you were directly exposed to this for whatever reason, or aren't even sure whether you were, and there are plenty of resources. We'll put some links in the show notes for how to determine whether you were directly impacted by this. But regardless of whether you were impacted by this particular issue, the fact that these supply chain attacks are coming and are actively looking to harvest credentials, AWS secrets, things like that, that they can go out and take over your machines or do much more nefarious things later. Um, having a playbook in place to rotate secrets and revoke access and things like that would be extremely valuable. That's something you can set up now so that when something happens or if something happens, you've already got it ready to go. And then more importantly, test it, right? Knowing that, like, having a playbook to rotate a secret that you've never tested and then finding out in the middle of an incident that your playbook doesn't work the way you want it to is not good. If you can instead be testing this regularly, ideally, to Mike's point, one way you keep your credentials short-lived is by automating some of these processes to rotate your secrets. So, right, if you can put these things in place, then guess what? Next, if something bad happens, you have a mechanism already in place to rotate stuff and make sure that you're blocking access. So even if your EDR doesn't catch it because it's a brand new attack vector or a new command, a C2 instance that is harvesting data that hasn't been blocked yet, you have other protections in place. It's the belt and suspenders approach. It's the layered defenses. We talk about this all the time. Security is like an onion; it has layers. Surprisingly related to an ogre. But at the end of the day, like, oh, look at that! Mike's even wearing the shirt today.
Almost like we planned this stuff.
Yeah, and it's funny because we didn't plan it, but it's like thinking about defense in depth means not just having the EDR in place and calling yourself good, not just doing the vendor due diligence, but having multiple layers of defense and multiple layers of getting yourself out of trouble if and when trouble happens.
Yep.
All right, Mike, any parting words of wisdom before we close out for today?
No, we may do a follow up to this at some point. It'll be curious as we learn more, just to say, hey, here's what else we've learned. Here's what else we've seen, etc. So I'm looking forward to just learning more as more information comes out.
Cool. All right, well, everyone, thanks for joining us today. If you enjoyed the content from today, please do share this episode with a friend. That helps us out tremendously. If you've joined us for the first time, hitting that follow button helps others discover us as well. It means you won't miss an episode as they drop. We drop these every Tuesday, so please follow along so you don't miss anything. And as always, you can submit your own questions at blacksmithinfosec.com/ask. Whether that's related to this topic or any other security or compliance topics, we will get to all those questions over time, so please bear with us. With that, we'll see you all next week.
Take care.
Get NIST-y.